I will begin this webinar called Untangling the Mess. And my goal here is to explain to you the way it works with performing rights organizations. Those are organizations like ASCAP, BMI, SOCAN, PRS if you're in the United Kingdom, GEMA to some degree if you're in Germany, SACEM in France, JASREC in Japan, performing rights organizations. Some of those are music rights organizations, and I'll explain that in a little bit. And then move into Sound Exchange, because these are common questions that I get. And then after Sound Exchange, also explain what a publishing administrator is, what a self-published songwriter is, how Audium fits into all of this, and a company that comes up a lot, gotta close the door again, excuse me, is called Songtrust. I'll explain what that is, CD Baby Pro, TuneCore Publishing, and how this all ties together and what you should be doing and where you should be registering and how you can collect your money and so forth. So with that being said, I'll do my best here with the easel. And I'm going to start off with the basics. Any of you that have seen me speak, you've probably heard this 1,000 times. There are 2 copyrights in each piece of recorded music. So I will use my now probably infamous example. Sony Records, actually it was Arista Records, hired Whitney Houston, and I just touched my nose, but I have washed my hands. So, oh God, sorry, there's so many beeps and bumps going off here. Here we go. Yes, it's me. Okay, someone just texted me. So, Arista Records hires Whitney Houston to sing a song. Here we go. The song they hire to sing is called I Will Always Love You. They pay her. They pay a recording studio, they record it, they get a recording of that particular song. The recording is now owned by Arista Records. So over here, we've got Arista, which is the record label. And I apologize if this gets out of focus or gets hard to read. And this is supposed to be a CD, and I Will Always Love You. And this is by Whitney Houston. All right, there we go. The recording is now owned by Arista Records, and that is recognized by a P, which means phonogram, right? However, Dolly Parton wrote the lyric and the melody. That's my Dolly Parton, and I'm sticking with it. Cowboy hat. No comments, please, on my Dolly. So Dolly wrote I Will Always Love You. Arista Records hired Whitney Houston to sing it. That is the second copyright. That is the C copyright. This is for the lyric and the melody. Those are your 2 separate and distinct copyrights in each piece of recorded music. So for every piece of recorded music in the world, let me turn off my notifications here. So the bings and bongs won't bother you. Thank you, Brian. Can hear you. Good news. Okay. In every piece of recorded music, 2 copyrights. One for the recording itself, that's the P. The second one for the lyric and melody. Now, what's interesting is you can be the same thing twice. You can be Dolly Parton and you can write the song I Will Always Love You, and then you can be hired by a record label to record your own song. In that case, you're still 2 separate and distinct things. You're Dolly Parton that wrote the lyric and the melody, so you control that. And now you've been hired by Arista Records to record your own song. Now they control the recording, but you still control the copyright. So what I'm going to be talking about today is this, all right? The copyright to the lyric and the melody. I really won't be discussing too much of this except when I discuss Sound Exchange, but for the most part, I'm focusing on this because this is called music publishing, publishing administration, songwriting. It all ties into the Dolly Parton side of things, and that's what I'm going to touch on as I go through this. So let me just erase this now, these incredible graphics. By the way, when we're done, I will show you how I have this easel standing so high. I think every book I have in the house has been put under these legs to make this thing high enough. Let me dry this off. So let me start with some very simple basics. Not simple, let me start with some basics. When you write a song and it's in your head, it doesn't get a copyright. It only gets a copyright, which means there's rules and regulations and laws and money owed when you make it tangible. And how do you make a song tangible, a lyric and melody? Well, there's really 2 ways. Number 1, you write it down, right? And then the second way is you record it. And when one of those 2 things happens, and it doesn't matter the quality, you could write it on a cocktail napkin, you could record it in your iPhone, but as soon as it becomes tangible, you instantly get that C copyright. Okay, now it's copyright protected. Now you have rights. And the rights vary depending upon different uses and so forth. But the minute it's tangible, you get a copyright. Remember, we're talking about Dolly Parton here, the lyric and the melody. So Dolly Parton writes the song, I Will Always Love You, and there it's in her head, and she makes it tangible. She writes it down, or she records a demo of it, right? When she does that, she instantly becomes three things. And I'll try to write this bigger so you can see it. I'm simplifying, okay, making sure that kind of works. Okay, that's a 1, that's a 2, that's a 3, that's my chicken scratch. Number 1, she becomes the songwriter. She becomes the songwriter because she wrote the song. Number 2, she becomes the music publisher, just a terminology we use in the music industry, so she's the music publisher. And that's because she owns the copyright. And number 3, she becomes the publishing administrator. So I'm going to shorten this, publish administrator, admin or administrator. And that means she's now responsible for licensing and collecting the money that her lyric and melody make when a recording of her song is used or sheet music is sold or other ways. So she's these 3 things. She's a songwriter because she wrote it. She's the publisher because she owns it. And she's the publishing administrator because she's licensing and collecting the money for her lyric and melody, I Will Always Love You. So she's 3 things. And when you're these 3 things, the vernacular, the words that we use in the music industry, don't worry, I'm going to explain this at length in a moment. The vernacular that we use in the music industry is called a self-published songwriter. And I'll even write it down, and I'm sorry about the loud noise of this easel. You should see how precariously balanced it is. Songwriter. So she's those 3 things. She's a self-published songwriter because she's a songwriter, she owns it, and she also licenses and collects it. So she's these 3 things. Now keep in mind, Dolly Parton could have co-written a song, let's say with Kenny Rogers, which by the way, he recently passed away. I'm 52, so although I'm not a fan of Kenny Rogers' music, I am a fan of Kenny Rogers, if that makes any sense. And I was very sad when he passed. I don't know, it just really got to me. Maybe because it just makes me feel older. It was important in my childhood, but I'll save that for a therapy session. So if she wrote a song with Kenny Rogers, let's say, and Kenny Rogers said, well, I'm responsible for half of the song and you, Dolly, are responsible for the other half of the song, then she'd still be the songwriter, she'd still be the publisher and still be the administrator, but only for, in this case, 50% of the song. So if there was $1 for the composition, for the lyric and melody, 50 cents would be owed to her, and the other 50 cents would be owed to Kenny Rogers. And this has no limit. When you get into hip hop songs and sampling and a collaboration, sometimes you could have 20, 30, 40 people, and you have to figure out how to slice that ownership of the copyright into all these little pieces. Someone can own 3%, someone can own 7%. And if you're sitting there and you're in a band and you're saying, wait, well, we collaborate together and we never really thought about this. Well, you should think about this because Ringo Starr didn't make as much money in the Beatles as John Lennon and Paul McCartney because Ringo didn't write the songs. However, what would have happened if John Lennon and Paul McCartney and the Beatles didn't keep track of what they wrote and they just decided, oh, let's just split it up evenly, right? Then they would all have shared the money differently. John Bon Jovi from the band Bon Jovi, if I recall correctly, most of his bandmates are considered work for hires, and he controls most of the copyrights and gets paid most of the money because he writes the songs. So you should discuss when you collaborate with someone else who owns what percentage of the song, and that becomes important because you need to give that information to other places to let them know how much money to pay you when some money comes in. So now I'm going to take a quick look over here to see if I see any pressing questions. So bear with me. There we go. Was there some music legislation preempted by the pandemic? Hey, everybody. I'm just scrolling through it quickly, and I apologize again. If there's probably questions, oh my God, there's a lot of messages in here. All right, I'm going to table this for a second, and I apologize. When I ask for questions, let me do this a different way. I'll roll through this, and then I'll go and ask if you have any questions, and I'll come back and I'll look and see if you have any, and I'll do my best to answer them. Plus, some people emailed some questions ahead of time, and I'll do my best to answer those. Okay. So with this out of the way, we now know lyric and melody, self-published songwriter represents all 3 things. And by the way, by default, each and every one of you out there that have ever written a song, and have recorded it or written it down, whether you knew it or not. This is you. You are by default the songwriter, the publisher, and the administrator. Even if you've never heard of these terms before, even if this makes no sense to you, you are these three things. So this is sort of where things start. This is the birth of the copyright. This is what you are, whether you know it or not. And this is the way the world works. You get this protection in this copyright, and you get to play these roles, whether you know it or not, the minute it's made tangible. So let me now move into this one, publishing administration, because this is where things get even more confusing. Okay, let me just use one of my, Lysol disinfectant wipes and forego wiping down a surface. Hang on. By the way, this will probably be the cleanest corona-free virus surface on the planet by the end of this webinar. All right, there we go. Okay. So let's move into publishing administration. Remember, I'm going to draw real small up here now. 1, songwriter. 2, publisher. And 3, publishing administrator. And here is the person that is all three of those things. Now, it is your job as the publishing administrator to license and collect the money that is being generated by the use of your lyric and melody. I hope you can see that okay. I'm looking at my computer screen. I see it's a little fuzzy, I'm sorry. Now, what are you licensing and collecting for? The right of distribution, the right of derivatives. I always misspell derivatives and I apologize. Derivatives, something like that. Whatever. The right of public display. The right of reproduction. The right of public performance. And then finally, the right of digital transmission. I spelled trans wrong, transmission, I apologize. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you're a publishing administrator, it is your job to license and collect the money for these 6 things. Okay, these are the rights, the types of rights that exist with this lyric and melody, with that copyright. And each one of these, here I'll spell this out, distribution. Each one of these is a separate type than the other, but they work in connection. For example, the right of distribution combines with the right of reproduction in order to allow for a download. So these are your 6 rights, and now it is your job, whether you know it or not, to go out into the world and license and collect this money from the entire world, anytime your lyric and melody is used. All right. And now what I'm doing right here, by the way, is I'm setting the foundation for you to explain the differences between ASCAP, BMI, Sound Exchange, Audium, Publishing Administrator, and so forth. So this is the information you need to make all this make sense and untangle what tends to be very complicated stuff. So each one of these rights works differently, but you are now the publishing administrator. So you have to deal with licensing and collecting these things. And before I explain what these are, you might say, oh my God, that is such a pain in the butt. I don't want to deal with it. I don't even know what that is. I like writing songs. I want to be a songwriter. I like owning the songs. I want to be a publisher. But dude, I don't want to deal with this. This is a pain. Well, what you can do then is enter into a relationship with another entity where you don't have to do this. Someone else can do it for you. And when that happens, you're entering into something called a publishing administration deal. Publishing admin deal. So for example, I say to this person, hey, tell you what, you go ahead and write your songs, you go ahead and own your songs, why don't you hire me to deal with licensing and collecting this money? And this person says, oh, that'd be great. And we sign a contract. And when they sign a contract, what they're literally doing is they're taking this publishing administration right and they're assigning it to me. So they no longer control that, but now I do. And I am now their publishing administrator. So they are still the songwriter because they wrote it. They are still the publisher because they own it, but they no longer license and collect this money I do on their behalf. And that is called a publishing administration deal. They are outsourcing to me the job of licensing and collecting the money that comes in from these 6 rights for the lyric and melody. And these are usually contracts. And going back some years ago, before I launched it at TuneCore, you couldn't just get one of these. Someone had to decide they would do this for you. So you would have what's called publishing administration deals. There was a great company called Bug Music Publishing. There's Olay Music Publishing. There's Sony ATV. There's Warner. There's Atlas. There's Round. I can go through a litany of companies that exist to do this. And they would decide whether or not they wanted to do this for you because it's expensive and there was a lot of legwork and paperwork. What happened is, as technology came up, companies like TuneCore, again, this is where it started, is I created a system to allow anybody to have access to hire a company to do this for them. And then once we launched that at TuneCore many, many years ago, must have been 2010 or 2011, then CD Baby stumbled into it and other entities got into it and Songtrust came into existence. So this is what a publishing admin deal is. You're either assigning the right to somebody else to do your licensing and collecting, or you're keeping the right yourself. If you're a self-published songwriter, you are also the publishing administrator. If you are in a pub admin deal, you are not the publishing administrator, but now this company is. And by the way, this company here can do these administration deals with a whole bunch of songwriters. So you could have 200 songwriters or more, all have done deals with this company to do this part, license and collect this money. And what I will do is I will collect the money, I'll do my job the best I can, I'll collect the money, I take a piece of the money, keep it for myself, for my work, and then I'm supposed to pay the rest back to you based on our contract. How much do I take? It can vary significantly. I could take 5%, I could take 2%, but it tends to be closer to 15% to 30%. Usually somewhere between 15 to 20% is kind of where your publishing administration deals are, which means when they collect money for this stuff and it comes in, if there's $1 and they're taking 20%, they'll keep 20 cents and they'll pay the rest to you, provided you are recouped. Sometimes they'll advance you money on what's coming in the future and they need to make it back before they pay you. So that's what a publishing administration deal is. And that is what a self-published songwriter is. And it's very important to understand the distinction between those two things. Many of the questions I receive is, I'm a songwriter, I wrote my song, how do I get a publishing administration deal? How do I get a publishing administrator? You are the publishing administrator. You're already in a publishing administration deal. You're just doing it for yourself. You just don't know it and it's not your fault. No one gave you the information. But by default, you are the publishing administrator. If you sign up with a company like CD Baby Pro or TuneCore or Songtrust, you are no longer the administrator. They are. You've assigned that right to them. And that is the important difference between the two, and you've got to get your arms around that. If you have done a publishing administration deal, you can no longer do a deal with anybody for this copyright. You can't do a deal with an Audium because you don't control the administration right. You can't go and say you're the publishing administrator with other organizations. They are. And that's the role that you're giving them. So that's a publishing administrator, and that's a self-published songwriter. So now I'm going to move into these guys over here, these 6 rights. And then I'm going to back into ASCAP, BMI, performing rights organizations, and then Sound Exchange. All right, goodbye, Dolly. There we go. All right, so very quickly, what are these rights? What do these mean, these 6 rights for that? Well, the ones that have really been impacted the most by technology, going back over the last 20 years, are really these guys right here, public performance and reproduction. Yes, the other ones are impacted as well. I don't want to discount them. But these in particular have ballooned in their necessity and revenue generation. So let me start with the right of public performance. What is the right of public performance? And this will tie directly into ASCAP, BMI, and performing rights associations. The right of public performance means that whenever the lyric and melody is publicly performed, the place that is publicly performing it needs to have a license. usually. And there's exceptions, like you do it in your house and play for your family. But if there's commerce involved, or broadcasts on television or radio or even the internet, all of that is a public performance of the lyric and melody. So here's some hard examples. You go to a venue and there's the band playing. The band is playing a song. Maybe they're covering the Beatles' Paperback Writer. If they're doing that, the venue has to have a public performance license to allow the band to perform that lyric and melody. So live venues need a public performance license. In addition to live venues, broadcast radio, AM and FM radio, they also need a public performance license. In addition to broadcast radio, television, regular television, that broadcast in the old days, NBC, CBS, ABC, now Netflix, Hulu. Every time one of those television shows broadcasts, it's used doing a public performance, and there's music in it. It does a public performance of the music that's in there. If you go into a movie theater and there's a movie playing with music in it, outside of the United States, those movie theaters need a public performance license. In the United States, we don't, just the way the rules work here. If you have an elevator and you hear music coming through the elevator, public performance license. You go into a grocery store, you go into a health club, you stream something on your Peloton exercise bike. All of that are public performances. So as you can tell, the opportunity for public performance is great. A noodle shop in Japan, right? A bratwurst place in Germany, and so forth. All of those are public performances. So if you're a self-published songwriter, which means you're the publishing administrator, one of your jobs now is to go out and listen to the entire world for every time your lyric and melody is being publicly performed. Oh, I left this out and I shouldn't have. The internet. Anytime there's a stream on YouTube, anytime it's on a website, every time there's a stream on Spotify, those are all public performances as well. So now it is your job as the publishing administrator, either because you're a self-published songwriter or because you outsource the publishing administration to the other entity, either case, both of them now, depending upon which way the rights are assigned, have to have an ear and listen to the world. And every time they find that lyric and melody being broadcast, it's a public performance, the entity that's doing that needs to be licensed, and most of the times needs to make a payment. Well, clearly you can't do that. I can't do that. Nobody has the capability to do that. How do you be a giant, omnipresent, omnipotent ear to listen to everything? So what you do is you hire someone to do that for you. And you take this one of these 6 rights, this right here, this one right, and you go, I'm going to hire somebody to do this for me. I'm going to hire a performing rights, R-I-G-H, there we go, organization. Also known as a PRO. And in the United States, we have a couple of PROs. We have one called ASCAP. See if I can spell ASCAP correctly. BMI, CSAC. We have another one called GMR. So these are your, there's a couple of others. The 2 biggest ones are right here, ASCAP and BMI. Those are the biggies. These guys represent, between the 2 of them, I think over 10 million songwriters and somewhere close to 90% of all of the songwriters and publishers. I'll get to that in a moment. So this is some great one-stop shopping, because if you're a company and you want to use music and you need a public performance license, if you do a deal with them and a deal with them, you're going to get a license, a blanket license to lots and lots of music and lots of songs and lots of songwriters. So the ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR are performing rights organizations, and they do one thing. They don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this. They do this. And it's their job, when you become a member of their organizations, right? You go to their websites, you sign up, you pay fees sometimes, you fill out forms. What you're doing is you're assigning to them the exclusive right. Sorry, taking that back. You assign to BMI and ASCAP the non-exclusive right, to CSAC and GMR the exclusive right. Let me just explain that later. To go out into the world and be a giant ear and listen for the broadcast of your lyric and melody on the internet, on television, on radio, all around the world. And that is what their one job is. They don't do any of this other stuff. So that is what ASCAP and BMI are, and CSAC and GMR. They're performing rights organizations. They do this one thing that you hire them to do. You're outsourcing it to them. But you still have to deal with all these other things. Now remember, you're either a self-published songwriter, in which case you are making the decision to do this, or you're a publishing administrator, right? In which case a self-published songwriter assign the right to the admin to you, they don't do it, now you do it. But in both cases, both of these entities are becoming members of this organization to go out into the world and listen to, license, and collect your money. Now, some people will say, well, wait a second. You mean to tell me that I'm going to take my right, I'm a self-published songwriter, I'm going to assign my administration right to them, and then they're not even going to do the job? They're just going to outsource it to them, and then they're going to take a piece of the money and then give me the rest? Why don't I just go to them myself? Good question. Don't have the answer to that. And what I mean by that is, this organization that says, I want to do this work for you, has to come up to you and explain to you their value proposition. Why should you use them? Why should you allow them to get a piece of the money for the work that somebody else is doing? And there's sometimes things involved, like something called conflict resolution, where you'll say you own 100% of a song, and someone else will say they own it, and now you're in conflict, and that has to get untangled and fought with. And other times it's registering the information in here. Just because you become a member, you have to tell them what you own. Hey, I wrote a song called Black Marker, and I own 100% of it, and I'm the person that wrote it, and so forth. And you have to fill out forms or online forms and remit it and submit it. So there's different value propositions, but it's really up to you to determine if you feel it's worth doing a deal with a publishing administrator for them to outsource to the same company you can have access to. Now, what's interesting is publishing administrators won't just do deals for one of these rights or two of these rights. They're going to say, I'll only work with you for all of these rights. Whether I do the work or not is irrelevant. That's my leverage. That's the way it's worked traditionally. That's the way we're set up to work now. It's just the way it is. So that's the right of public performance. And that's what ASCAP and BMI are. They are performing rights organizations being hired by either the self-published songwriter or the publishing administrator to go and listen for the broadcast of the Lyrica Melody around the world on the internet, on television, on radio, in retail shops, and so forth. And when that happens, money is collected, they take a piece and remit the rest back to you. So that is a performing rights organization. What I did not discuss is something very unique about public performance, and I'm going to do that now because I bet a number of you are out there going, wait, tell them what's this about a songwriter versus a publisher. So the money that comes in for the Lyrica Melody, for this, distribution, derivatives, public display, reproduction, and digital transmission, that money gets paid to one entity and one entity only, and that is the publishing administrator. So when money comes in for this, or this, it either gets paid, all of it gets paid to the self-published songwriter, or the self-published songwriter has earned it, or it gets paid to the publishing administrator working for the self-published songwriter. In every case except one, public performance. So now what I'm going to do is show you what happens with public performance money, because it is different income than all the other income that comes in. With performing rights organizations, PROs, when the money comes in, what they do is different than when money comes in for this, and this. They'll take the money, it'll come in, they take a percentage. So they're going to take a piece of them. Let's say, oh God, I got to do easy math here. Let's say money comes in, they take a percentage, they put it in their own pocket for the work, and what's left over is $1 after they take their percentage. They're going to take that $1 and they're going to do something that nobody else does. They're going to split the dollar. Just looking there, make sure you can see it. Okay, here, $1. They're going to split that $1 and they're going to say, we're going to pay half of that dollar, 50%, or in this case, 50 cents, to the songwriter. They're going to take the other 50%, which is another 50 cents in this example, and they're going to pay it to the publisher or the publishing administrator. So what does that mean? Well, let's go back to our prior example. Okay, we're going to go back to the self-published songwriter versus the publishing administration deal. Self-published songwriter, 1, 2, 3. They are the songwriter, they are the publisher, and they are the administrator. Versus, okay, that's your self-published songwriter, an admin deal, pub admin. Pub admin is just the administrator. And what happens with the pub admin deal, the songwriter, publisher, assigns the admin right, 1, 2, 3, not from them, and assigns it to them, right? So those are your two different types of deals, self-published songwriter or publishing administrator. So when a dollar comes into ASCAP or BMI or performing rights organization, they're going to take half of the money that comes in this case 50 cents or 50%, and they're going to pay to the songwriter. Okay, so let's go for the self-published songwriter. They're going to pay 50 cents to the self-published songwriter because the self-published songwriter is the songwriter. They wrote the song. Then they're going to take the other 50 cents and they're going to pay it to the publishing administrator, basically, right? So in this case, they're actually going to pay the 50 cents to the publisher, but I'm using the admin right to follow the money. They're going to take the other 50 cents and they're going to pay it over here as well, because this person is also the publisher and the administrator. So this person is going to end up with the full dollar, assuming when they went to register with the performing rights organization, they explained to the performing rights organization that they are both the songwriter and the publisher. If they don't tell them that, right, if you just go and you say, hey, I'm the songwriter, in some cases they'll go, great, we'll pay you the 50 cents for the songwriter, but we don't know who the publisher is. And so they'll literally hold on to the money because they don't have the information in their database. This is why when you register, become a member of ASCAP or BMI or other performing rights organizations, you need to make it clear if you're one, the other, or both. Okay, so that's the way the money flows when you're a self-published songwriter for public performance. ASCAP, BMI go out, they collect money, they take a percentage. The percent that they take changes depending upon where the money's coming from, television, radio, the internet, and so forth. That they do a deal, frequently, by the way, the performing rights organizations in the United States will say, well, we're going to do a relationship with an organization just like us in Germany. We're going to go to an organization in Germany called GEMA. And GEMA is kind of like us, and they're going to listen to stuff there, and we're going to listen to stuff here. We're going to reciprocate rights, and they're going to try to collect money for our members. They'll take a fee for their work, kick it back to us, we'll take a second fee, and then we'll split it up. So they create these pipelines to collect this money. Comes in, it gets split. That's for the self-published songwriter. So how does it work when it's not a self-published songwriter? Let's go now to the second example. Let's go to you are in a publishing administration deal. Okay, now we're going to show how the money flows for that. Ooh, that's loud. So the same dollar shows up, 50 cents or 50% goes to the songwriter, and the other 50% goes to the publisher. Okay, but this is different this time. It's actually going to go to the admin. Publishing admin, there we go. It's going to work differently this time. Let's say down here, this publishing administrator went to this person, let's make it Dolly Parton, and said, hey, I'll do your administration. And Dolly says, no, I'll do it myself. I'll do it for you, and I'll tell you what, I'll even write you a check now for $1 million of the money you're going to make in the future. Great, I'll take $1 million, you got it. So we do a deal, and a check gets written to Dolly for $1 million. Now Dolly owes them, the publishing administrator, $1 million in the royalties that came in off of this. So you would think if a dollar comes in for public performance, that Dolly wouldn't get any money because she owes back to these guys $1 million. And she hasn't made that money back yet. That's called an advance, and this is called recoupment. Well, that's not the way it works with a public performance organization. A public performance organization doesn't care what's going on over here. They don't care if Dolly owes them money. They don't care if these guys are gracious or horrible or whatever. They do something to protect the songwriter. And what the performing rights organization will do is they'll take 50 cents under all circumstances, half the money of the dollar, and they will pay it still to the songwriter. So it doesn't matter that Dolly's in a publishing administration deal. She's going to get half of the public performance money, no matter what. That's one of the benefits of a performing rights organization. They split the money. The other 50 cents, this guy, that'll get paid to them, right? Doesn't get paid to her. So they get to collect money back to offset the $1 million they gave her. Also, the 50 cents that goes over here, the publishing administrator doesn't get to take any fee, doesn't get to take any percentage of it. It's going directly to the songwriter. Over here, when it's being paid to the administrator, they are taking a fee. And this is, again, a benefit of a performing rights organization. They will split the money, pay the songwriter directly for half, and then they'll pay the second entity, the publishing administrator, the other half. Now, the publishing administrator can be yourself or another company. If it's yourself, you're going to get the songwriter percentage and the publisher percentage. If you're not, and you're in a publishing administration deal, you get the songwriter money, the publishing administrator gets the publisher share. That's a very important distinction about public performance. All the other things here, distribution, derivatives, public display, reproduction, digital transmission, none of them work like that. For all of these, the money goes to one place and one place only, to whoever controls the administration right. There's no split between songwriter and publisher. It's just money for the composition, right? And it goes either to the self-published songwriter, all of it, or all of it goes to the publishing administrator. Only public performance gets split like that. So that's the unique nuance about ASCAP, BMI, and performing rights organizations. They work like this around the world. All right, now let me get rid of that. Just these incredibly clear diagrams. I'm sure you're floored by them. Hang on. All right, so now that's the first one of these 6 rights that I've talked about. The second right I'm going to quickly touch on. It's right here, the right of reproduction, because the right of reproduction has been influenced a lot and impacted a lot by technology. So the right of reproduction, literally, it has what I like to call sort of 2 subsets to it, 2 very popular subsets. So reproduction. Remember, if you're a publishing administrator, either because you're a self-published songwriter or because you're a publishing administration company like Sony ATV or Songtrust, you're licensing and collecting these 6 things. And the right of reproduction usually splits into 2 categories: synchronization and mechanicals. These are just industry jargon used to describe income types. So synchronization, that is when you synchronize a moving image to a lyric and melody, right? Synchronizing a moving image, a movie, a TV show, a YouTube video, a video on old MTV. It is pictures, and there's a song playing that's been synchronized to it. Hello. Sorry, I'm just having a visitor, which threw me off. So that's the synchronization license. It's when you synchronize the lyric and melody to a moving picture. That's sync income. The second type of income is called mechanical royalties. It's just a name. They could have called it banana royalties. It's just called mechanicals. And the root of the word mechanicals comes from when there were player pianos, and people used to write songs and put them into pieces of paper and piano rolls. If you ever watched the television show Westworld on HBO, the opening of the show has that player piano with that roll in it. That's a player piano roll. So people would write songs, they'd punch out paper, so when the paper got put into the piano and the piano would play it, it would make the piano play. It was a mechanical device, and every time one of those piano rolls sold, the person that wrote the song would earn 2 cents. The term mechanical has stayed with us, and the right of reproduction means every time there is a reproduction, which is a legal definition, of the lyric and melody, the entity doing that needs a mechanical license and needs to make a mechanical payment. So what is the right of reproduction? The right of reproduction is when you take a lyric and melody and you record it, let's say, and then you manufacture a piece of vinyl. It has now been reproduced onto that piece of vinyl. If you make 1 piece of vinyl, that's 1 reproduction. If you make 10, that's 10 reproductions. Each reproduction is supposed to receive a payment for it. And I'm in a table right now, the right of reproduction, mechanical royalties, and there's sort of the nuances to it, because that's a whole other 2-hour presentation. But that's what a mechanical royalty is. Manufacturing vinyl, manufacturing cassettes, anything physical. On top of that, the internet came into existence, and we began to do things that weren't physical, like a download. A download isn't like a piece of vinyl. You can't hold it. And so the law was extended and changed to say, Hey, you know those downloads? Digital phonographic downloads, DPDs. All right, those also are going to need a mechanical license. So whenever the record label would manufacture a piece of vinyl of Whitney Houston singing Dolly Parton's song, I Will Always Love You, the record label needed to go over to Dolly Parton and get a license called the mechanical license. And every time it manufactured a CD or a piece of vinyl, it would need to then remit a payment to Dolly Parton under the terms of the license. That's a mechanical royalty. Mechanical royalties extended to downloads, and then they extended to something called interactive streams. Okay, these are all pieces of new technology. An interactive stream is something like Spotify or Apple Music or Deezer or Rhapsody, or I guess it's called Napster now, or Google Play or YouTube Music. The services where you can go and pick the music you want, you can start, you can stop, you can go backward, you can go forward. That's called interactive. And if you can't do that, like the original Pandora, that's called non-interactive, and they work differently. But the right of reproduction is necessary for physical downloads and interactive streams, and it generates mechanicals. Now, some of you might be saying, wait, what about YouTube? Well, there's different components to YouTube. YouTube, again, is a very complex topic to discuss. But to keep it simple, there's something called user-generated content. That is, I go to YouTube and I create an account and I take a video of my two cats fighting. And in the background, we have the song I Will Always Love You playing as performed by Whitney Houston, written by Dolly Parton. That's a piece of user-generated content because I'm the user, I generated it, and I uploaded it to YouTube. Now, when I do that, what I've done is I've synchronized, whether I realize it or not, a moving image to the lyric and melody, right? If there are my cats fighting, and it might not be in sync, but it doesn't matter. In that case, the YouTube revenue from user-generated content, because there's actually a moving image, a movie there, is synchronization income. It's not mechanical royalties. The two are different. And the reason that's important is the laws over how this money is calculated and what type of licenses you need and when payments are made differ if it's a synchronization income versus if it's mechanicals. And that's why that's important. So that was the second right, right? You've got all six, and I'm only talking about these two. The right of reproduction is the second right. PROs do public performance. Reproduction, you can either, just like you could do public performance rights on your own if you want to, you can't. It's very difficult. You could do reproduction rights on your own if you want to, and you can, but it's very difficult. So to answer the question as to what is Audium, the company that I started, that I now run, and what do we do? Audium is a company that does one very specific thing. Just like ASCAP and BMI are hired by the self-published songwriter or the publishing administrator, or just a songwriter in some cases. They're hired to deal with the collection of public performance money. Audium is hired to deal with the licensing and collection of only that money. As a matter of fact, it even gets narrower. It only deals with the licensing collection of the money for the right of reproduction for mechanicals for streams in the United States, or YouTube only in the United States, or all digital mechanicals in Canada and YouTube in Canada. So we work at Audium, just like ASCAP and BMI work for either the publishing administrator or the self-published songwriter. If you've done a deal with Songtrust, with TuneCore, with CD Baby, or with someone else for them to be your publishing administrator, Audium, we can't work for you. We can only work for the publishing administrator because we are required, they've got the administrative right, and we have to remit payment to them. If you are a self-published songwriter, we can work for you because you can control that administrative right. If you are a publishing administrator that works for a whole bunch of songwriters, we can work for you, but we can only work for the administrator. So that is what Audium does. Audium does that one thing just for YouTube in the US and Canada, and it does that one thing for streaming mechanical royalties in the United States and download and streaming mechanical royalties in Canada. That's it. We don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this or this or this. We do this one little thing, and we're hired as an outsourced solution by publishing administrators or self-published songwriters. We are not a publishing administrator. That is who we work for. ASCAP and BMI are not publishing administrators. That is who they work for. We all work for you. So I hope that it sort of clears that up. And now I'm going to get into a more detail, because I get this question a lot. Well, what about Songtrust? Can I become a member? And Songtrust comes up a lot. What is Songtrust? Songtrust is a publishing administrator. It does deals with self-published songwriters, and it says, don't do your own licensing and collection. Let us do it for you. You can still be the songwriter, right? You wrote the song. You can still be the publisher. You own the song, but become a member of our organization, sign up with us, and now we'll take over the licensing and collection of these 6 rights, and you won't have to. And in return for that, we're going to take a fee when the money comes in that we collect, and we'll pass the rest back to you. That's what they are, and that's what all publishing administrators are. So how does that jive with Audium? Because I get that question a lot. Audium is not a publishing administrator. I know I've said that a few times. I'll say it again. If you need to walk by, go for it. That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Sorry, my daughter. She's telling me that the whiteboard is dirty, and she's probably right. So let me make it a little cleaner. Thank you. Once again, your knowledge is more important than my coronavirus extinguishing. All right. Oh, you're right. Look how dirty that was. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Kira. Ugh. Okay. So if you do a deal, sorry, let me get back on track here. Okay. If you do a deal with Songtrust, you have just assigned to them the exclusive rights to be the publishing administrator. And now they're going to license and collect the money for these 6 rights. If you do a deal as a self-published songwriter with Audium, all you've done is hire us to collect and license this one of these 6 rights. So we are not a publishing administrator. We at Audium, we can work for Songtrust. They should hire us. We would make them more money and thereby make you more money. That deal just hasn't happened yet. We do work for companies like Songtrust. We work for Roundhill Music Publishing. They're a publishing administrator. We work for Rough Trade. We work for Mute Songs. We work for Clearbox and Blue Water and a number of publishing administrators. But we also work for self-published songwriters. We can work for both. Whoever controls that administrative right, we can work for. So that's the difference between Audium and a publishing administrator. We work for publishing administrators. A publishing administrator is either you as a self-published songwriter or the company you hire to be your administrator. That's who we work for. We are not a publishing administrator any more than ASCAP and BMI are. So that explains, I hope, in a way to understand the difference between a self-published songwriter, a publishing administration deal, performing rights organizations, Audium, the right of reproduction, and mechanicals. Now, one of the questions I get is, do I need to hire someone for public performance? Can't I just license on my own? Technically, yes. You don't need to become a member of ASCAP or BMI or SOCAN or anybody. Technically, you can go out into the world and say, I've written these songs, and if the television show wants to use it, you need to get a license from me. You don't have to deal with anybody. The problem is your ability to enforce that. Because if you've not become a member of one of these organizations, typically what will happen is the television network or the production company or even the streaming music service will say, well, screw it, I'd rather not use your music than have to deal with going with you direct. I'd rather go to these sort of clearinghouse collection agencies that represent a whole bunch of people at once. And the same thing holds true with the right of reproduction. You don't need to have anyone do this for you. You can do it on your own. I created a company that does that one thing and does it very well, and it does it in a very unique way, which confirms you're actually getting paid, and it provides you analytics and information. But by no means, you don't need to use an Audium, just like you don't need to use a performing rights organization. But we're an outsourced solution. It's almost like doing your taxes. You could do them yourself or hire an accountant to do them for you who understands the tax laws. And there's other whistles and bells, and I don't want to turn this into an infomercial, so I'm going to stop there. But that is what Audium is, and that is how we work, and that's what a performing rights organization, and that's how they work. Now, the other rights here, I'll touch on those for 2 seconds before I sort of segue into the next topic. The right of distribution means the ability to distribute the lyric and melody Now, the lyric and melody doesn't exist unless it's recorded to be distributed. So there's usually a recording, not usually, there's a recording that gets distributed. Derivatives, that tends to be sampling. You take a song and you take MC Hammer. God, my age is showing again. Can't touch this, right? It has Rick James sampled in it. So he used a different recording that was done of another song into his own song. Or God, if you really want to get, well, I'll just leave it at that. That's a derivative work. Or another derivative work is if you take a song and you change it into another language, right? That's considered a derivative work, and you need a special license for that. Public display is lyrics. So if you ever see lyrics, you open up Apple Music, you play a song in Apple Music. They've got that cool feature now where the lyrics are showing up below the song and it scrolls with them. It's publicly displaying the lyrics. They need a license for that, a separate license than this other stuff. If they don't have that license and they're showing your lyrics, that's copyright infringement. So if there's a website out there that has your lyrics on it without a license, they're infringing on your copyright. And then digital transmission has to do with when the internet came up and we moved from AM and FM broadcast radio and traditional television into like digital fiber optics and satellites and so forth. The law needed to be expanded to allow for that. So that's what digital transmission is. But the ones that really drive the revenue are these two right here. So just going through my brain, we did self-published songwriter, we did publishing administrator, split of songwriter and publisher money through a performing rights organization. We've touched on reproduction, mechanical royalty, licensing, and collection. So now I'm going to move to something completely different called sound exchange. You're good? Okay. Sound exchange. What is sound exchange? As I get this question a lot. So sound exchange has nothing to do with the lyric and melody. Sound exchange has to do with the recording. Completely separate right, completely separate income. And by the way, before I forget over here, another question I get a lot is, if I'm a member of ASCAP and BMI or SOCAN or APRA in Australia or SACEM in France, does that create a problem for you here? No, it doesn't. Separate rights, separate collections, separate countries. There's no conflict here. We don't get in each other's way. Now, over here, sound exchange. Sound exchange was created in the mid-2000s. What happened is Napster came into existence and people began to file a share and music sales began to drop and downloads showed up. And all of a sudden the record labels that had this huge control over the music industry, they were making a lot of money by selling a 5-inch circular piece of plastic for $19 so you can hear one song that you liked on a CD. That whole model got smashed. And the record labels began to lose money. And they're like, oh shit, we need to make more money. I know what we can do. Why don't we do something that the whole rest of the world does that we in the United States don't do? And what that is whenever music is played on the radio, like FM radio or AM radio, we'll make the radio station pay us money for the recording. Now let me go back a step. When radio plays a recording, they play the new U2 song, they play the new Radiohead, they play the new Lil Nas, whatever it is. When they play that recording on the radio, going back in time, they would have to pay money for the lyric and melody for the right of public performance. But they did not need to pay a royalty for the recording for the right of public performance. They only need to pay it for the lyric and melody, but not for the recording. And that's just the way the United States grew up. There's historical reasons for that, but broadcast radio doesn't need to pay money, AM, FM radio, when it played stuff, for the public performance of the recording. Everywhere else in the world, except like North Korea and Iraq, basically, they do pay money for public performance of the recording and the public performance of the lyric and melody, 2 payments. In the United States, we only get 1. So the record labels, because the revenue was declining and they were trying to find ways to make more money, said, well, let's go to the United States Congress and let's lobby and let's try to put through legislation where now the AM and FM radio stations, when they played our music, they'd have to pay the second fee because that'll help us make up for lost sales and it's more money, and why not, right? Well, as you can imagine, the radio industry pushed back and they got into a big battle on Capitol Hill in the United States. And the end result was something called sound exchange. What happened is a law was passed that said, okay, listen, AM and FM radio, you still don't need to pay money for the public performance of the recording. But if that recording is now broadcast digitally, satellite radio, Sirius XM, if it's digital, meaning it's on, you ever watch your cable channels at the very top of your cable channel? Sometimes there's music choice, you can listen to music. That's a digital transmission coming through a fiber optic cable. If it's streaming on the internet, or a radio station does a simulcast, so they're streaming their stuff on the internet, or Pandora, the original Pandora. If that happens, because that's all digital, that's not AM, FM, that's a digital transmission. So if there's a digital transmission of the sound recording, and it follows certain rules called Digital Millennium Copyright Act compliant, DMCA compliant, then the entity that's doing that has to pay money for the use of it. And we're going to set the rates, we're going to regulate this to the government, and we're going to create an organization that will collect this money, and we're going to call it Sound Exchange. And Sound Exchange will collect the money for the non-interactive, remember interactive is Spotify, original Pandora is non-interactive, non-interactive Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright, compliant digital transmissions. So DMCA compliant means you cannot pick the song you want to hear. You can say, I love the Beatles, I love Paperback Writer, and then Pandora will build a radio station for you around that concept, but they're not allowed to play that exact song. Over a half an hour, they can't play the same artist something like 3 or 5 times, I can't even remember. You can only skip a song so many times per hour. You can't go backwards. You don't get to know what's coming next. If it follows these sorts of rules that make it feel like AM or FM radio, it's DMCA compliant, and you can do that, but because you're broadcasting it digitally, you have to pay a public performance fee for the sound recording. That money goes to Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange collects it, and then Sound Exchange will take the money it collects, it'll take a percentage for itself, and it'll take what's left over, percentage for itself, and it takes what's left over, and it will split it, and will pay 45% of the money here, 50% here, and 5% here. So I'll explain this in a second. Okay, here's $1. So if after Sound Exchange takes its fee, it's got $1 left over for the public performance of a sound recording, okay? From that $1, 45 cents will be given to the performing artist. So let's go to Whitney Houston performing I Will Always Love You. She's the performing artist. Arista Records hired her, but she performed it. So she's going to get 45 cents of that $1 every time that recording, even though it's owned by Arista, controlled by Arista, she is a performing artist, so get 45 cents. Now Arista Records, the record label, they're going to get 50 cents of that $1. And then 5% of that $1 is going to be paid to unions that represent musicians and session players. And then, because you have background musicians, right, that perform sometimes in the songs, and they're going to get their unions and organizations are going to get 5% of the money. And that's what Sound Exchange does. It collects money for non-interactive DMCA compliant digital transmissions of sound recordings that has nothing to do the lyric and melody. It is completely segregated, it is completely separate, and that's the way it works. So all of you out there, you should go and you should register with Sound Exchange. It is free, right? It is a requirement. It's a quasi-governmental organization. And when you go there, they're going to ask you questions like, do you control the sound recording? Are you a performing artist? And you need to give them this information. And then what they do is they get an information from Pandora and all these digital radio stations in the United States, and they try to figure out what's being played, and then they try to connect what's being played back to the information they have, and then they pay you. It doesn't cost you anything to join. By the way, it doesn't cost you anything to join Audium either. ASCAP, BMI, I can't remember which one charges for the publisher, but not for the songwriter. But anyway, you should definitely affiliate with Sound Exchange. So that's what Sound Exchange is. Sound Exchange collects money for the digital transmission of non-interactive public performance for sound recordings, which has nothing to do with the collection for the lyric and melody. That doesn't mean, by the way, when Pandora does play a song, it's making 2 payments. Sound Exchange is collecting one, and then over here, there's other entities collecting the other. Now, a nuance here is Pandora doesn't have to use Sound Exchange. Pandora can go directly to the record label and get a license from them, and when they do that, the split of the money doesn't have to happen. And a lot of the sort of direct licensing is now happening because it's allowing SiriusXM and Pandora to lower costs because they can get better deals and so forth. And that's why SoundExchange revenue is going down, and they're trying to figure out what to do with the organization. It's, you know, it's not like it doesn't collect hundreds of millions of dollars, but it went through this huge growth. But once Sirius bought XM and consolidated, and then Pandora's been put under their wing, they then, SiriusXM and Pandora are doing direct license with the labels, which means they're bypassing SoundExchange. So that's what SoundExchange is. All right, let me get rid of this. And I'm going to go back up over to here. And then I'm going to stop, I think, and see if I can figure out questions to take. So the next thing I want to touch on is the money that comes from these interactive streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play. Okay? When those organizations use a lyric and melody, I'm going to talk only about the lyric and melody now, they actually have to get a number, they don't have to get all these rights, they have to get a couple of them. So the two big ones that they have to get are these two right here. The right of reproduction for mechanical, and the right of public performance. So from Spotify, I need those two rights. Okay. Now, I've recently written a document called the Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties. It runs about 45 pages. I think it has 67 graphics in it. If you go to my Twitter feed, which is TuneCore Jeff, which I'm going to change shortly, just because I can't take being associated with TuneCore anymore. I'm disappointed in what it's become. But if you follow my Twitter feed and you go there, you can find the link to download it. It explains a lot of the stuff I just did. It's well designed and hopefully will be educational. But it also talks about this at length. So Spotify needs the right of reproduction and the right of public performance in order for it to have the rights necessary to stream a recording. So it needs both for the lyric and melody. All right, so I'll do this very quickly. For Spotify to get the right to the recording, it literally calls up the record label, it signs a contract, or the distributor, the two sign contracts back and forth, and it gets the rights. For it to get the rights to the composition, it doesn't need to have a direct contract. It can follow rules that the United States government created called a compulsory license. And again, I discussed that in nauseating detail in the document. I encourage you to download it. The reason I'm getting into this is because I want to explain the way the money works in Spotify for the composition. When the money comes in, so first, how does Spotify get the license? Okay, public performance, as we discussed, is represented by performing rights organizations. So Spotify will do a license with them, BMI, ASCAP, etc. And the license it does is for all the songwriters and publishers it represents, tens of millions of songs, and they agree on a royalty rate and how, or the payment that will be made between them to them, and then these organizations are supposed to remit it back to here. Then it needs a second license. It only has one right there, right? It needs two, it only has this one. Where does it get the second right for the right of reproduction from? I wish we could do the interactive thing where you were sitting here. So the second right for the right of reproduction, as you're aware, can only come from the publishing administrator. And there's two types of publishing administrators, the self-published songwriter, or the second is a publishing admin entity. So for it to get the right of reproduction, it needs to go to a self-published songwriter, a publishing admin, or with the advent of my company Audium, there's actually a third choice in the market, Audium, which is a reproduction rights collection agency that represents those two things. So they can get a license from any of these three places. Once they have these licenses, I'm going to table how that happens and the copyright infringement that occurred and how they did not have licenses. Once that happens and the money comes in, the money then gets split between these two rights. Right, so let's say that the royalty calculation is set by the United States government, and again, very complex, and it's in that article, The Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties. Just go to my Twitter feed, TuneCore Jeff, scroll through, you'll find it, and post this presentation. I'll retweet the link so you can just download it. What happens is on a dollar that comes in, about 50 cents of the dollar will go for the mechanical, and the other 50 cents will go for the right of public performance. Okay? So on a full dollar that's earned, it's split. Half of it will either go to the self-published songwriter, publishing administrator, or Audium, and the other half will go to the performing rights organization. Just wanted you to be aware of that. So that's another quick fun note. And one last thing you should be aware of. And now I'm going to clean this off. Bear with me here. Now I want to move into how do you collect your money for digital uses from around the world. And this is a part of the industry that's got to change because it's just not right now. In my opinion, artists are getting screwed. Songwriters and publishers getting taken advantage of. And it doesn't need to be this way anymore, but I guess it's the music industry, so it kind of happens a lot. Okay, so let's say you are a songwriter and you want to collect your money from the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe when Spotify is playing it, your digital mechanical royalties, okay? This is your mechanical royalties. How do you collect that money? Well, right now you kind of can't. You can't call up Spotify and go, hey, Spotify, this is me, I live in the United States, you're using my stuff in Europe, you have to get a license from me and pay me. They're gonna not bother with you. What are you gonna do? Sue them in England and every country and throughout the EU, you can't afford it. Frankly, they could just not use your music. So you could do a deal with an organization called a publishing administrator. We just discussed that. A publishing administrator, companies like Cobalt, Olay, Sony ATV, Songtrust, TuneCore, CD Baby Pro. Let me just remove CD Baby Pro and TuneCore for a moment because they have a whole nother layer of stupidity in them. You do a deal with a publishing administrator. You've just done a deal for those 6 rights, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now they're collecting all the money for that. Now they have to go get your money out of Europe. How do they do it? They then do another deal. They do a deal with the music rights organization. I'll give you an example. There's one called SACEM. SACEM operates out of France, but SACEM will license and collect money from places like Spotify and Apple Music for all of Europe. So what they'll do is a deal with, let's just use Spotify as our example. Okay, so you've assigned a right to them, they've assigned a right to them, and then they assign a right to them. 1, 2, 3 rights assignments. Let's say that at some point in the future, you want to audit what's going on out there. You're not going to audit them or them, you're going to audit them. You're not even at the source of the information. So how does this flow work? You give them the right to allow for streams of your lyric and melody. They then assign that right to them. They then assign the right to them. Question, what royalty rate was negotiated between them and them? You're way back here. You can ask them, they can ask them, they may or may not tell them. You don't know. Usually, it's very hard to figure it out. So how does this actually work? And what are you hiring these people to do? Because your administrator, as you're aware, is taking a percentage of your money. So let's go through this flow. Let's say that you wrote a song called Black Pen, right? So you tell them Black Pen, they tell them Black Pen, they tell them Black Pen. Spotify, this is the way it actually works, will send back, I'm actually gonna use a different color ink. Spotify will send on a time basis, maybe quarterly, a file to them. It's called a usage log. And the usage log contains a list of every recording that's streamed in Spotify in that time frame. Let's make it every 90 days. So it's a list of tens of millions of recordings. There will be a recording called a Black Pen. Okay, remember this person over here, let's say Joe. Joe wrote the song Black Pen, but let's say there's another person over here named Steve, or Jill, let's make this Jill. Jill also wrote a song called Black Pen. Here's a recording right here called Black Pen. Spotify sends it to SACEM. SACEM needs to know to connect this recording of Black Pen to Joe or to Jill, if they know who she is. Or maybe they don't even know who it is. So what happens is these organizations, these music rights organizations, get these usage logs, and if they connect every recording back to every songwriter, they don't get a lot of them. They miss somewhere between 10 to 30% of the recordings. They just don't know because they weren't built to do this. Audium is, by the way. And yeah, that is an upsell because we're very good at it. But anyway, they miss some of them, which means the money associated with those recordings doesn't get attached. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, they'll send back to Spotify, back this way, a list and say, okay, we went through this, and here's what we found and what we connected, and we've negotiated a royalty rate, and here's an invoice. Spotify then will pay that money, switching colors, back to SACEM. All right, so there's your dollar figure. So there's going to be some money left here because it wasn't caught by the music rights organization in the first place. Then the money, then this huge file comes back here with money. Now, whenever you transfer data back and forth, big data, lots of data, there's always bad data. And when there's bad data, that means the money associated with that data doesn't go where it's supposed to go because there's bad data. You can't figure out who to give it to. So some portion of the money will remain here. The money that remains here, we call that black box money. And that black box money will be held on to until some point in the future where it will either be used to pay for their overhead, or alternatively, this black box money will be taken and given to the publishing administrators based on their market share. So Warner Brothers, Sony, Universal, BMG will get this money based on their market share. That could be your money, by the way, just didn't get matched properly. In addition, they're doing all the work here. It's a lot of hard work. And then what they'll do is they will take a percentage of the money. Now, typically, they'll take somewhere between 7 to 15%. I'm just going to put it at 10%. All right. Now, in addition to the 10% this organization is taking as their fee for them, they're also taking more money. It's just not an administrative fee. They take fees for something called cultural fees. So they'll say, look, we've created laws for us, rules for our organization that say we need a certain amount of money for SACEM to go towards French culture and French art. So we're going to take that and we're going to use that to support our French culture and art and our French music scene, which is a good thing, but it's not really disclosed. And that's another chunk of your money gone. Or blank copies of DVDs or CDs, we're going to take some of that. So there's even more money peeled off than the 10%. It's just not an administrative fee, so you're kind of not even aware of it. As a matter of fact, if you go and you look at some of the annual reports from these music rights organizations, you'll see the total amount of money being taken off the top can be as high as 29%, even though their admin fee is only 10%. It's just buried in other ways. So they take their fee, and then they kick back the file. They do a transmission of here. So here's your Song Trust. Okay? So Song Trust now gets this file and goes, great. Song Trust then takes another fee. Let's put them at 15%. Okay, now Song Trust, or I'm not picking on them, publishing administrators in general, don't really audit the results that come in, because if they could do that in the first place, they wouldn't need them to outsource to do the work. So they just kind of accept it, and for the most part, what they get is what they take. They can't figure out what's missing because they don't know ahead of time, and they're just not built to do that. So they're outsourcing the work to someone else. That other entity can't do the job as well as they should. They take their fee, they take additional money for other fees that you don't know about. They kick it back to these guys who didn't even do the work that these guys did. They'll take another percentage of the money. Remember, the more black box money left here and the higher their market share, the more they make off of it, and they don't need to pay royalties. And when this kicks back here, there's going to be bad data. And the bad data means there's money that's coming in, they don't know who to pay it to. And that money is called suspense money. And these organizations hold it in suspense for usually 5 to 7 years, after which point they will take it and keep 100% of it as retained income because they don't know who to pay it to. Then after they do that, they'll kick it back to you sometime later, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year, sometimes a year and a half, till it goes back. So let's follow the money on that, right? So if you can still see, you know, it works better on this side, sorry. We'll follow the money on that. So we start here, let's say that there's $1 earned, but they're not going to find the full dollar because they missed some recording. So let's make it, we'll do 90 cents. So on $1 that's actually earned, 90 cents makes it back to this organization. Let's see if you can see that. Oh, not very well, I'm sorry. So we'll start with $1 and then 90 cents makes it back. Is that better? Yeah, okay. Now, the organization, the music rights organization, is going to take their 10%. 10% of 90 cents is 9 cents. That leaves 81 cents. But they're also taking additional money that you don't know about for the cultural fees, the blank fees, and other stuff. So you can drop the 81 cents down to about 75 cents. Okay, so here we are at 75 cents. 75 cents coming over here. Now they're taking 15% of that. 10% is 7.5, 14, 15. So there's like another 17 cents being taken off of that, which means minus 17, 25, 65, 60, it looks like. So you're getting around, by the time we get down to here, you're getting around 52 cents on the dollar. And it's taking like a year, year and a half to get there. And the entity that's taking this fee here didn't even do the work. and the entity that was hired to do the work is missing the money, and that they benefit whenever there's bad data because they get to keep the black box money, and they benefit when there's bad data because they get to keep the suspense money. And this is the way the world works. Now, the problem is you don't have a choice because there is no pipeline that allows you to go directly to Spotify because they won't do a deal with the millions of songwriters around the world. And if you want to cut out this middleman here, for the most part, you can't do it. Right? So you have to have the second dip in here, which frankly doesn't make sense. And that needs to change. There's no reason why it needs to be like this. We can have something like this. There just needs to be the political will to do it, and it makes more sense. And you could have one entity licensed to everywhere around the world, and that will be coming. The question is when and who, not if. So that's something I feel very passionately about. That needs to change. And there's one last thing, and then I think I'm going to be done. So one last question I got, which is how come I can't sign up with Songtrust, but also sign up with Audium? You can't, but Songtrust won't let you. In other words, you could go to Songtrust or a publishing administrator of any sort and say, listen, I'd like to do a deal with you, but I don't need you in the United States and I don't need you in Canada. So can you just do my collection for the rest of the world? And those organizations can do that. They should do that, but they don't. Instead, they leverage you and they say, no, if you want to get that money through that really weird system I just showed you from the rest of the world, you have to give me the rights to your stuff in the United States. And you'll say, but wait, I don't need you. I can use ASCAP and BMI to collect my public performance in the United States. And I can use Audium to collect my mechanicals in the United States. I don't need you for that. The response will be, well, then we won't work for you. So if you want your money from Europe and the rest of the world, you have to give us the other countries, even if you don't need us, because that's just sort of the leverage we have. And that kind of upsets me as well. It doesn't need to be that way. Anyway, I think that's about it. I hope that untangled some of the mess for you. I will tweet out the link to the definitive guide to Spotify royalties again. And now I'm actually going to go over to my computer and see if there's any important question that you'd like answered that I've missed. So I'm going to be here. I'm just over here to the side, bending over, putting on my glasses and taking a look. If anyone has a question, please let me know. Just leave that there for now. That's okay, Kara. That's a very nice light. Can you put it, let's straighten that back up. I appreciate it though. Okay, yes, that's good, thank you. All right, hey Jeff, let's see. Oh, 99 new messages, all right. How will Audium work with the new MLC? Okay, wait, how many ring rights is that? Oh my God, there's a million questions. How can we work with HFA and Audium? Thank you, Jeff, you're welcome. Okay, let me talk of the Mechanical Licensing Collective and the Harry Fox Agency. So, right now, the way the world works is if Spotify wants to use your composition, and Spotify is just sort of my generic interactive streaming music service. I'm going to straighten that out a little bit. And I'm going to take a sip of water. There we go. They need to get a license from you, and they need to make a payment to you. That hasn't been happening. I blame them. This isn't happening because they didn't build the necessary infrastructure to get the license and make the payment. Instead, they just sort of skipped it and said, screw it, let's try to get first to market. And so some of these companies, like a Spotify, who had a lot of money invested in them, over $2 billion, just ran to get public into the stock market and figured they would infringe on copyright or possibly, let me take that back, would potentially not build the right systems, possibly infringe on copyright and so forth, and just clean up the mess later. And that's what they did. They didn't make the payments. So the way it works in the United States now is a streaming music service like a Spotify or an Apple Music has to get a license to this and then remit payments for that. And what ended up happening is they didn't get the licenses to this and they used the music anyway, and that's infringement. They got caught and they got sued. They got, because Audium sort of untangled the mess and figured out what wasn't happening. And at the same time this was going on, you had Warner Brothers or Warner, Universal, and Sony all owned equity positions in Spotify. They literally owned stock in Spotify, and they were trying to get the company public, which is totally fine, because if Spotify got public, it could mean each company can make a lot of money by selling their stock. Well, Spotify did eventually make it public, and Warner, Universal, and Sony and others made billions, that's with the B, of dollars off of the public sale of their stock, which they got to keep without having to pay royalties on it. However, it created a conflict because everyone that wasn't Universal, Warner, and Sony, most of them were getting their rights infringed upon. And so they worked really hard, the people that own stock in the company, to stop Spotify from getting sued and try to get it public. And they created settlements that didn't really settle and so forth. A lot of tension occurred. Ultimately, when all the dust settled, the major music publishers and their trade organization called the National Music Publishing Association worked with these organizations to create something called the Music Modernization Act, which was a new bill which has become law. And the new bill changes the entire way the money gets paid in the United States and makes one major horrible thing happen. So right now, the way it's supposed to work, this is a self-published songwriter or a pub admin. Okay. When there's a stream of a recording on Spotify, it creates two payments, one for the recording and one for the lyric and melody. Again, download the definitive guide to Spotify royalties. Go to my Twitter feed, flip down, you'll find it, and I'll tweet it afterwards. It goes through this in an excruciating detail, but it has to pay these two royalties. When Spotify pays these two royalties, if you remember from earlier, part of the money from the stream goes to the Performing Rights Organization for public performance, and the other goes here for mechanicals. Okay? If you're a self-published songwriter, you're supposed to get paid. If you're a publishing administrator working for songwriters, you're supposed to get paid, and you're supposed to get paid on the 20th of the month for the streams from the prior month under a royalty rate set by the government, which I again explain in detail in the article. That's the way it's supposed to work. They're supposed to pay you directly. And it makes sense, right? If you're going to have a company that's going to make its money off of the use of your stuff, they should know who you are before they use your stuff, and then they should pay you when they do use your stuff. It's not very complex or complicated. They made it complex and complicated because they didn't build the right technology to take in the information. So what happens with the passage of the Music Modernization Act, instead of them paying you directly, everything changes. Now, let me go here, get rid of all this stuff for a second. Now, under the Music Modernization Act, the rules say that Spotify will instantly have a license to every one of these, every song, the lyric and melody, on the planet instantly. And that's going to start, I think, January 9th, 2021. That's when it kicks in. On that date, instantly, Spotify will have a license to every song on the planet ever written in the past, in the present, or the future. It's called a blanket license. Whether it exists now or not, doesn't matter, they're licensed. So they can no longer be accused of infringement by using something without a license. In addition, they don't have to know whose music they're using because they're going to use everybody's stuff. And they don't have to make sure anybody gets paid because it's not going to be their problem anymore. Instead, what's going to happen is they're going to take all the money that's owed for those mechanical royalties and they're going to give it all to an organization called the Mechanical Licensing Collective. Now, this organization is a new organization that's being created and goes live in January of 2021. And this organization gets all the money for mechanical royalties and all of the information as well. And guess what? They don't need to know who anybody is or what gets used either. And this organization now is responsible for paying all of you, either the self-published songwriter or the publishing administrator. So what we've done is we've created a middleman between Spotify and you for your money by having it funnel through the Mechanical Licensing Collective. Not the best idea. In addition, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, if they can't figure out who to pay because they can't find you or you don't register with them, guess what? They get to keep your money, and they wrote into the law that if they don't pay you your money because they can't find you or because there's some technical data error or whatever, after a period of time, if they can't find you and they don't pay you your money, guess what? They get to take your money, recommend your money get taken, and get paid to others. But guess who they get to pay it to? The board of directors of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which consists of Warner, Universal, Sony, the very people that helped to get the law passed. For the first time in the United States of America, we've made it legal to steal your money if we don't pay it to you and give it to ourselves for failing at our jobs. I kid you not. And that is the most controversial portion of it, is this liquidation provision that says if after a period of time you don't get paid, your money gets taken from you. That did not need to be there. Sorry, you go right ahead, sweetie. They just stuck it in. It's one sentence in this really big long bill that did not need to be there. And to this day, it really makes me angry. It's not right. It doesn't need to be there, but they did it anyway. So anyway, that's the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So the question is, what role would Audium play? The same role it plays now. It would be able to take a look at what comes in from these guys and see what the hell's not there, and then ensure we recover it prior to them being able to liquidate it, just like we do now with these guys. The only difference, by the way, right now, we can go back in time and recover the money. There is no law that allows your money to be taken and given to other people. So if you have money that's been earned from Spotify dating back to 2011 when it first launched in the United States, and you've never been paid that money, part of what Audium does, it's able to go in and find it, untangle the mess, clean up their database and recover it, right? You move into the Mechanical Licensing Collective, it's possible that money doesn't get paid out, in which case it will never make it to you. So this is my problem with a provision, close it all the way, with the provision of the Music Modernization Act. The Mechanical Licensing Collective, I can even live with that, but that one provision that says your money can be stolen from you and given to others that didn't earn it based on their market share, that also happen to run the organization that's not paying you, oh, and who, by the way, they don't even need to use? That's really crinkly and loud, so you gotta be less crinkly, okay? Okay, thanks. So that's part of the Music Modernization Act, and that's how Audium fits in, is just like we do now. We're gonna deal with auditing what's coming in. We're gonna see what's there, what's not there. We're gonna go recover that money. Those are very loud. Thanks, sorry. The other thing that Audium does is it provides business intelligence. So we have a whole system called Layla, which provides you information on how your music is being used. For example, each streaming service, how much is being generated for each stream, a list of all the sound recordings of your composition, how much money each one makes for you. We have another system called Omega, which finds all the holes. So there's lots of other whistles and bells, and we deal with getting the information out. Now, the other thing, out to all the services, the other thing that's important about the Mechanical Licensing Collective is it is only allowed under the law to license mechanical royalties and nothing else for this streaming. In other words, when you go to Apple Music and it shows lyrics, that's a public display license in addition to the mechanical license. That's a group license, right? Pandora uses music in a very unique way where someone can watch a video advertisement before, and then they get to pick the exact song they want to watch. That's a hybrid license. So Audium is direct licensed with many of the music services for the bundle of rights, which allows you as a songwriter or a publishing administrator to participate in the other types of music use. You won't just be restricted to just the interactive stream. It could be the interactive stream with the lyrics, or the music video can appear as well, things like that. So we do bundle licensing, not just interactive. We audit, we recover, we deal with the conflicts, we provide business intelligence and so forth. So that's a quick lowdown. Not a big fan of this. And frankly, most of us out there were not licensed with Spotify, and the passage of this bill just dragged us all back in and took away the power we had because they had infringed on copyright, and it opened the door for us to do all sorts of things. And man, I'm just not a fan of parts of this bill. I'm not a fan of, in particular, this part. So that's the Music Modernization Act, and where Audium fits in. And the other thing I want to talk about is the Harry Fox Agency, which is a horrible name. So the Harry Fox Agency was created in 1927. And the Harry Fox Agency was owned 100% by the National Music Publishing Association. Okay, the NMPA is a trade organization here in the United States that represents the interests only of its members. On its website, it says it represents the interests of all music publishers. That's just simply not true. They just say that, and it's just a false statement. They just don't. Which is nothing wrong with it. I just don't know why they have to say that. They represent their dues-paying members. So the NMPA created a company called the Harry Fox Agency. And the Harry Fox Agency came into existence, and what it did is it took the information of the NMPA members. What songs did you control? What's the name of the composition? Who's the songwriter? And things like that. And Harry Fox began to get into mechanical licensing. That's what its function was. And what it did is it created a simple way, this is going back sometime, for record labels to get a license from Dolly Parton or the entities working for the Dolly Partons and then remit payments. So prior to Harry Fox existing, there were two ways for a record label to get a mechanical licensing. One was something called the compulsory license, which is basically a regulatory way to deal with things by the United States government. And the other, on the other end, was a voluntary license, which means you picked up the phone and called someone and tried to negotiate something. This was really complex, and this was difficult to achieve as well. Harry Fox kind of came right here in the middle and created a scalable way to do this. So anyone could show up here and get a mechanical license. And then what would happen is, that's another crinkly package there, Sport. And it's more crunchies. Yeah, we can all hear that. Sorry. So Harry Fox came right in the middle here, and it allowed anyone to come to the Harry Fox organization and get a mechanical license. Then what would happen is Harry Fox would collect the mechanical royalties. It would take a percentage for itself and would pay the rest back to its clients. And then it would take a percentage of the money it made and would kick it up to the NMPA to help them fund its organization. So that's the way Harry Fox began. It worked for the publishers. It worked on their behalf. It would used to sue the companies using the composition that didn't have the mechanical license because it worked for the publisher over here on behalf of the NMPA and its clients. What happened is, as you go over time, the amount of money for mechanical royalties began to go down, and it began to go down because of technology. And it began to go down because people could buy individual songs and then move into streaming, so it made less and less money. And ultimately what happened is the NMPA and Harry Fox said, oh shoot, what do we do? How do we stay in business? How do we make more money? And so what they did is they changed teams. Whereas before they would work for the publisher, right? Now they began to work, who was the licensee, they now worked for the other side of the fence, the licensor. So they began to work for the other side that would need the license, in this case, Spotify. So they began working for these guys instead of these guys. That's what ended up happening. So now Spotify pays them a whole bunch of money to go out and deal with licensing and making payments to them. They work for them. They do not work for you. They work for them. Another organization, Music Reports, MRI, they work for them. They do not work for you. Their job is to protect their clients from getting sued. Their job is to perform back office services. Their job is not to make sure everyone gets paid unless that's part of protecting their client. Their job isn't to make sure everyone is getting paid accurately or on time. Their job is to protect the companies they work for. Then you've got the other side of the fence. That's where ASCAP, BMI, Audium, that's where we fit. We work for you. So Harry Fox was hired by Spotify to go and get licenses and make payments. And they couldn't do the job. Most people weren't licensed. Most payments weren't getting made from sort of a volume perspective. That ended up getting Spotify sued. They tried to protect them. It didn't work. But that's what Harry Fox is. It's a back office organization. It's just a third-party company that's been hired by these organizations to do work, and they can't even do the job properly. I'm going to tell you straight up, I've been in a fight now for the last month with Amazon because Amazon uses MRI. They do not pay properly. They do not pay under the terms of the license. They are non-compliant with their own license. I have been fighting with them for years, begging them, just get rid of these guys with, just let us do the work for you for free. We won't even charge you. And they're like, no, we don't want to do that because that means we'll have to spend more money doing a workflow that we don't want to deal with. Why is that our problem? How difficult is it for you to abide by your own terms of your own licensing contract? Is it really too much to ask you to pay the people the money that have earned the money? But apparently it is, which is why they're so happy about the MMA, because guess what? They don't have to deal with it anymore. They're going to kick it all over to that organization I I pointed out called the MLC. And guess what? Guess who's going to be doing the technology for the MLC? Not the board of directors. Guess what? It's going to be Harry Fox. The very same company that can't pay you now is going to be in back office of the MLC, except you know what? When they can't pay you then, guess what? They get to take your money. I get really angry about that stuff. So that's Harry Fox. That's Music Reports. And now I'm going to go back to my computer and see if there's a couple more questions. I'm going to wind down. So hang on. Oh, geez, there's a million questions coming in. I'm so sorry if I don't get to them. If I hire disc makers to make CDs for me and I sell the CDs online like Amazon, who pays me the mechanical royalties? That's what Spiritual Rapper asks. Spiritual Rapper, the answer is it depends who wrote the song. So Spiritual Rapper, if you wrote the songs, then by default, you're paying yourself. You're giving yourself a license. If you're covering other people's songs, then you will be responsible for getting that license and making the payment to them. So that's the answer to the Spiritual Rapper song. Let's see. If reproduction royalties haven't been collected from a pub admin, where are they held and how long are they held for? Okay, reproduction royalties, mechanical royalties are not held by publishing administrators. You are the publishing administrator. Remember, that's the terminology. By default, you are the publishing administrator. Unless you did a deal with someone else, then they are. So the royalties, if they've never been paid to you and you've earned them, are sitting with these music services that haven't paid them out because they never build the systems to pay them. How do you get them? Well, you should be able to just contact them and go, hey, listen, here's my information, pay me, but they built no systems to do it. That's kind of why Audium exists. You're more than welcome to join Audium. We'll go fight that fight for you. The other option is you contact Spotify directly and say, hi, my name is so-and-so. Here's a list of my compositions. You've streamed recordings of my songs in your service. I've never been paid my mechanical royalties. I never even received a license. They'll probably say, oh, go talk to Harry Fox. And now you got to go deal with the incompetence of Harry Fox and hope that they'll take your information and do reprocessing runs and pay you. Outside of that, there really isn't another solution. So Audium, A-U-D-I-A-M, sign up. We'll go do it for you, or go deal with Spotify and Harry Fox directly. All right, what else do I got in here? In the field of publishers, what should we fill out while distributing songs with distributor with my label? Should we live on this publisher? Okay. Okay, quick answer here to Jen J. Can I go over DistroKid? Are they a distributor and PRO or publishing administrator or question mark? And can we belong to Audium and DistroKid? How about BMI and SOCAN and DistroKid? Okay, so remember, you've got two distinct and separate copyrights. Let me move my glasses, sorry. Sound recording, lyric and melody. Two separate things. Music distributors, DistroKid, TuneCore, CD Baby, Ditto, Ingrooves, The Orchard. They're doing the sound recording. They're taking the sound recording and they are distributing it to make it available in the online music services. DistroKid is a distributor. They distribute a sound recording. They are not a publishing administrator. They are a distributor. So they'll take your sound recording and they'll send it to go into Spotify. When it goes into Spotify and it streams, two payments. One payment for the sound recording, a second payment for the composition. From Spotify, the money for the sound recording goes to DistroKid, okay? DistroKid takes 0% of the money and they'll pay the rest for you. That's just for the recording. The second separate royalty for the composition is not paid to DistroKid or TuneCore or CD Baby for their distribution. It is to be paid to you directly. And if it's not, then they're not being compliant, or you can hire a company like Audium and we'll go and deal with it for you. So two separate payments, two separate things. So yes, if you become a user of DistroKid, who, by the way, I highly endorse and recommend DistroKid. Best in show, kicks the crap out of all the other distributors as far as I'm concerned. No, I don't own it. No, they don't pay me. I wish I could tell you TuneCore, the company I started and ran for 6 years, was best. It's not. I wouldn't go near that company now. I just really wouldn't. DistroKid, cheapest, best in show. I trust them, good company. DistroKid receives money for the sound recording. You are the publishing administrator. You are supposed to get the mechanical royalties. You can outsource it to a company like Audium if you like. You can outsource it to a publishing administrator who could outsource it to Audium. Two separate payments, two separate royalties. You can become a member of DistroKid and you can become a member of Audium, just like you become a member of DistroKid and become a member of BMI and ASCAP. BMI, ASCAP, Audium are over here. DistroKid is over here. Two separate things, But when the recording streams, two separate royalties, two separate systems and pipelines to collect the money. No conflicts. Let's see what else is here. And can we belong to Audium and DistroKid? How about BMI and SOCAN and DistroKid? Yes, BMI, SOCAN are over here. Okay, they work for the lyric and melody, whereas DistroKid works for the recording. Two separate things, completely segregated. One doesn't touch the other. Money is generated on both sides, but you need to be part of these organizations in order to collect all of your money usually. So you're free to become a member of Sound Exchange, BMI, ASCAP, Audium, and DistroKid. There's no overlap. Completely separate. Okay, let me move back into these questions. Getting my glasses. Let's see. Yes, Kira. My daughter has a quick question. In the field of publishers, what we should fill out while distributing someone distributor with my label? Should my label name as a publisher? Okay. So the question from Ma is, in the field of publisher, what should we fill out while distributing song with distributor with my label? Should I put label name as publisher or my name? I'm not sure I completely understand the question. If you're using a distributor, like a DistroKid, you're typically being asked the name of the band, the name of the song, the name of the release, the genre. That's very different than who wrote the song. Now, if you remember, sorry, I'm tripping. If you remember back to earlier in this conversation, I pointed out on this side with the lyric and melody, you can be three things: the songwriter, the publisher, and the administrator. Okay? So when you're going to become a member of BMI or Audium or SOCAN, you're going to want to know the songwriter name. That's usually your name. You can hang it up, sweetie. Thank you, though. The songwriter, that's usually your name. Now, what you can do is you could create a whole separate company called your publishing administrator. For example, Bob Dylan is the songwriter of All Along the Watchtower. And then he created another company called Ramshorn, which is the administrator. So it's his own company that licenses and collects the money. So he's both the songwriter as Bob Dylan. We're good? Okay. He's both the songwriter as Bob Dylan and the publishing administrator. So it's up to you. When you become a member of ASCAP, BMI, or Audium, you tell us, are you a songwriter, Bob Dylan? Do you have a second entity that you've created for your publishing administration? It's still you, it just has a different name. It's a different sort of business entity. And if you don't, then your publishing administrator is also your name. But you could also create a whole second company and call it, you know, a light bulb or whatever it is. So that's really up to you. So when you fill out the information, distributor is about the sound recording, SOCAN, BMI, ASCAP, Audium is about the composition. The thing you need to know is the publishing administrator name and the songwriter name. And if you don't have a publishing administrator name, then by default, the songwriter is the publishing administrator name. All right, what else we got? Hang on. Sorry, old man glasses. What else was playing on TV? Sorry, I'm mumbling. From Corey Lane, how would all this apply to music that was played on a TV show that is only distributed through the network's mobile apps versus TV? Who, if anyone, collects on that? Motor Trend app, for instance, that I believe is owned by Discovery Network. All right, very complex question. So the first thing is, if your music is being used in a TV show, it doesn't matter if it's only on an app or a broadcast television, two licenses, two synchronization licenses, one for the recording and a separate synchronization license for the lyric and melody. Those are the two things that need to be upfront. Now, typically what happens is the entity that wants to use your music in a TV show will make a one-time payment for you called the synchronization fee for the right to the recording and a second payment for the right to the lyric and melody. It could be two separate entities, right? You could have Lenny Kravitz doing a cover of, let me do a different one. You can have Jimi Hendrix performing All Along the Watchtower, written by Bob Dylan. The recording gets licensed, that's one fee, and then Bob Dylan gets a second fee, right? Now, every time that television show is broadcast, be it digitally or through regular television, there is also a public performance fee earned for the songwriter and publisher. So to answer your question is, if you're talking about the license, two separate licenses, two separate payments, and then every time it broadcasts, means it streams on the app or gets played only online, there's a public performance fee that's generated that your performing rights organization, so can ASCAP BMI would be aware of, collect, and then are supposed to remit to you, provided they have your information. All right, going back, looking for more questions. I'll be back. Let's see. Jeff, what do you think about the distributor Amuse.io? This is from Jas. I've never heard of them, so I don't have an opinion. Raphael Bellamy, what are your best advice to collect money with the best amount of money for the creators? Well, again, that depends if you're talking about the recording or the lyric and melody. For the recording, use DistroKid. Less expensive, best in show, 100% of the revenue comes back to you. Great company, couldn't endorse it more. For the lyric and melody, affiliate with the performing rights organization in your own country, wherever that is. And then my 2 cents, use Audium for collection in the United States and Canada. That's why I built the company, and that's what we're good at. Outside of that, if you're looking to do a publishing administration deal, you really don't need one in the United States and Canada. You just don't, because the way the laws and rules and pipelines work here. Where you do need it is outside of the United States and Canada. So if you can do a publishing administration deal with an organization that can mop up your money from the rest of the world, so be it. But US and Canada, frankly, you really should do it on your own, because all you're doing is hiring someone else to do the work for you for public performance and reproduction rights. All right, going back, let's see what else we got. Let's see. So if someone's saying that we don't respond to them, I can't add more songs. I've tried numerous times to reach someone. Who can I write that will actually help? Well, Ali Diaz, that sounds like a really shitty experience. I'm sorry, that shouldn't have happened. If you email support@audium.com with specific questions, they're supposed to respond within 24 hours. Please give it another shot. And my deep apologies if no one's gotten back to you. Maybe they have and it went into a spam filter. I just don't know. So moving on to the next question. Let's see. Wasn't Harry Fox bought by CSAC? Yes. Harry Fox, someone asked me about the Harry Fox Agency. The NMPA did sell Harry Fox Agency to CSAC, which is a United States-based organization, in 2015. And Harry Fox's inability to pay people correctly, appropriately, or do their work continues to this day. As a matter of fact, we delivered to them over 150,000 compositions going back to last April of last year that they still haven't paid a single solitary fraction of a penny on, despite the stuff streaming in the music services for years, because they just don't have the ability to do it. And frankly, Spotify doesn't care. And if they can just make it until January of next year, all the liability is gone because the new law kicks in and their asses are covered. So let's see. Is HFA the same as CMRRA in Canada, as Pete Beauchart? No, HFA is not the same as CMRRA in Canada. Harry Fox works now for the other side. Spotify pays them, right? A service fee. It's like, here's X amount of dollars to do a job, work for us. CMRRA works for the other side. They work for the publishers. They don't work for the Spotifys. CMRRA has had its challenges technologically. They even had their own sort of senior executive embezzle over $1 million of mechanical royalties. I don't know if he ended up in prison or not. I noticed that they've been delinquent on payments. And frankly, Audium provides the same service as CMRRA in Canada, only we're better at a lower fee. But no, HFA is not CMRRA. Okay, what else we got? Mechanical licensing is part of the right to reproduction. Yes, a mechanical license is part of the right of reproduction. Reproduction is synchronization and mechanicals. Those are the two big subsections. And that came from Jose. Someone named Val says, so Audium has got a relationship with MRI. Remember, MRI works for Amazon. They're paid by Amazon. They don't work for you. I don't have a relationship with them. I don't care about MRI. I care about Amazon. It's Amazon using your music, and it's Amazon that has to make the payments. Now, Amazon hired MRI to make those payments. So I will look at what MRI sends to us and show them how delinquent they are, or where they're wrong, or what they're missing. But I could give a rat's ass about MRI. They're not using your music. I didn't hire them. They're a third-party vendor hired by Amazon or Pandora to make payments. So whoever these companies hire or do it themselves, it's my job to make sure they're licensed and they're paying you properly. MRI to suggest for a moment that they work for you is beyond insincere. And every time they show up saying, hey, we have this great new license for you to sign, They're not saying that for your benefit. They're hired by these companies to get as many of you to click the damn button as possible, because then it allows these companies to use your music under deal terms that you don't even get to negotiate. All right, moving on. We need the Joe Pesci character from Casino to negotiate for songwriters at Spotify. You know, we actually had it until the MMA was passed. That really undermined our ability to collectively negotiate. All right, a couple more, then I'm done. Is it possible to get a recording of this? Yeah, I'm probably going to upload it. The MLC only deals with streams in the US. That's Michael Eames wants everyone to know that. Yes, the Mechanical Licensing Collective under Section 115, interactive streams. However, the Mechanical Licensing Collective can also be hired for direct licenses. It's not only for interactive streams, but it can only license the interactive streams. And Michael Eames, by the way, sits on a very important committee for the Mechanical Licensing Collective. And I actually like him very much, and he's very good at his job. It's his job to deal with getting that money that hasn't been paid out into your pockets before it can be liquidated. And I'm glad he's part of that organization. Let's see. Let's see, now I'm really depressed. I have copies of my logs and still money for 8 years. Okay, so Dunham Music, if you have copies of your logs of showing recordings of stream, but you haven't gotten the second separate royalty, sign up with Audium. We'll go get it for you. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Oh my God, another 100 new messages. I'm sorry, guys, I'm doing my best here. My question is, if I'm a producer writer and I own the master and have a co-writer, I have an admin pub deal with an entity. Oh, hang on. How can I collect from DSP and won't let DSP pay the co-writer that sent me to HFA? Okay, I'm going to simplify that question. If you control the right to musical composition and you're the publishing administrator, let's say you control 50% of a song, you're supposed to get paid your mechanical royalties. It's that simple. Whether or not you own the master or work, it doesn't matter. If you control the administrative part of the copyright and you own a piece of the song, you're owed the royalties. Yeah, they sent you to HFA because Spotify, et cetera, built no infrastructure. They hired a third-rate company that couldn't do the job to begin with to pay you. And guess what? They're not paying you because they can't do the job, which makes it even more disgusting that they've been hired to be the technology engine from the Mechanical Licensing Collective so they can continue not to pay you. That's, again, where Audium comes in. That's the sort of stuff we deal with every day. So, again, you can either go to Harry Fox and go, hey, Harry Fox, pay me. Fox will go, oh, you need to register with us to get paid. Bullshit. That's not the way the world works, okay? The way the world works is Spotify used your music. They're supposed to know who you are ahead of time and then make the payment to you. There's no requirement for you to register with some strange third-party organization to get paid your royalties. What Harry Fox is really saying is, yeah, we couldn't find you. We don't know who you are. Spotify sent this recording stream. Yeah, we couldn't find the data. They never gave it to us. Can you tell us who you are? And then maybe we can try to figure out if you're supposed to get paid and do a reprocessing run. Or you could just hire Audium. Okay. Sorry, this is going so fast. Stop. Can I sign with 2 PROs at once? So if someone's asking if they can sign with 2 performing rights organizations at once, the answer is yes and no. Only one performing rights organization as the songwriter, but you can become a member of multiple performing rights organizations as the publisher. All right. DDEX, any software company do you recommend to add the right metadata? So Alfredo is asking about any software company that you recommend to add the right metadata. And the answer is no. The format you're describing, DDEX, it's a technology specification that creates a standardization. It's really not something that you should be worrying about. It's what we should be worrying about. You shouldn't have to go out into the world and invest in software application technology to create some sort of computer output to give to somebody who doesn't have the ability to take your information. We use that to communicate with each other. But really, if you think about the Mechanical Licensing Collective, you should be able to go there and just type things in plain English. So there's nothing that you can put into your stuff ahead of time. When you go to a DistroKid or a CD Baby or even Audium, or even BMI or ASCAP, we create a user interface for you, something online or a form for you to fill out. When you fill that out, we're extracting from you the information that we need, and then we're going to convert it into different formats to send around to talk to all the other machines. That's kind of our job for you. All right, what else we got in here? How much time will it take to claim on my videos on YouTube? Please answer. From Lavish, I know I mispronounced your last name, Bahakcha. How much time it will take to claim on videos on YouTube? Please answer. So It depends what you mean on claiming on YouTube. Remember, there's a composition and a sound recording. The way the YouTube system works, this is a whole nother conversation, a whole nother webinar. But if you're showing up with a sound recording, what happens is you send the sound recording to YouTube. YouTube makes a fingerprint of your sound recording and then has a robot listen to the audio in every video in YouTube. And when it finds a match, it then does something to it where it'll put a claim on it and authorize it to be monetized. Just because it authorizes it to be monetized doesn't mean it will be. That video has to be eligible to be monetized, and then it actually has to make money. But assuming all that comes into place, if you signed up with someone like Audium today, give us a sound recording and or a composition, and we found those videos in the next couple of days, which is usually what happens very quickly over the next couple of days. What month is this? Then the money generated in March gets paid at the end of April, and then the April payments that we receive, we pay out every 45 days. So April, May gets paid by June 15th. So that's a question to that. Let's see what else we got. Visit, okay. John Riley gives a link for information on the MMA and MLC visit, and he gives it a link. Someone that I was working with hip hop music. Okay. So Ted Thea says, I was told at one time that Audium was working with hip hop music or rap music when I went through DistroKid for content like on YouTube. So we get this question a lot. YouTube has requirements that they say you have to follow in order to give them a sound recording for them to make a fingerprint of to have the robot go and listen to the audio. And they say if the recording you give them has beats or loops or samples that are used in other recordings or are available for GarageBand, then you can't send them to them. And if you do, it's a violation of their policy. So we at Audium have to follow the YouTube policies, because if we don't, YouTube could shut us off. So when you upload a sound recording for hip hop, as an example, or EDM to DistroKid or to Audium, who works for DistroKid for that, or directly to us, and that recording has loops, beats, or samples that appear in other recordings, we are not allowed under the terms of our agreement with YouTube to send that to YouTube. And if we do, they punish us. So that's not our restriction, it's the limitation of their little robot in the way they listen to music, which is why when you upload stuff, you're asked to make sure there's no loops, beats, or samples in it. Okay, moving on. Sorry I'm doing this so fast. Let's see. Sorry, I'll be right back. I just keep getting penning. If I have my music already in Harry Fox music, and put it on. Okay. So this is someone says if I have my music already on Harry Fox and Music Reports, can I still put it on Audium? You don't have your music on Harry Fox. You don't have your music on Music Reports. Harry Fox and Music Reports were hired by Spotify, hired by Amazon, hired by Apple to do work. They don't use your music. They don't work for you. They work for them. You haven't granted them any rights, right? They're being paid by Amazon and Spotify to pay you. You don't even need to do anything with them. They're lying to you if they say you need to register with them in order to be paid. That's not the way the laws work, okay? That's just them spinning things in order to work for their clients. Yes, you can become a client of Audium. Whether or not HFA or MRI pay you or don't pay you is completely irrelevant. They have nothing to do with this. They're not using your music. They're just back office companies that do their best to do their job, and frankly, don't even do it all that well, in my opinion. So there's a question. Let's see. If you're already in the SACEM as a songwriter, can you go to Audium? So someone asked if they're a member of SACEM, which is a music rights organization in France, can you become a member of Audium? And the answer is yes. SACEM represents you for specific rights in specific territories. Typically, they do not represent your musical composition for the right of reproduction for streaming mechanical royalties in the United States. As such, you can come to Audium and affiliate with us directly, and we'll go to work for you. So the answer to that is yes. Okay. I have an affiliation with Audium Sound Exchange Music. Should I just say my account with Music Reports? Okay. Someone says I have an affiliation with Audium Sound Exchange Music Report. Should I disassociate my account with Music Reports? You really don't have an affiliation with Music Reports. Music Reports is just a company that's been hired by Amazon to do work for them. You're not assigning them any rights. You haven't hired them. Amazon is paying them. They work for Amazon, and all you've done is give them information about yourself, which is totally cool, but you're just giving them data. That's all. There's no association, there's no contract, there's no affiliation, there's no contractual agreement. They work for Amazon, they don't work for you. So the short answer is you don't have to do anything with music reports if you become a member of Audium. They just kind of make it sound different than it really is in a way to get people to do things to benefit their clients, which are the music services. How would all this apply to music that was played on a TV show that only, okay, we already did that one. And I think I might be done here. Oh, Ferric versus Spotify. Hello, Jeff. As a settlement class member of Ferric versus Spotify lawsuit who's complied with all claim submission requirements, when do we get paid our share of the settlement? Will it be a lump sum and or future royalty payments? How does that work? This is from Javier Molina. So I am not an attorney, although I play one on TV. The class action lawsuit with Spotify had dates where you had to remit all the information. It looks like you've done that. I suggest you go to the Spotify settlement website and see the dates that they have listed there as to when you can expect payments to coming out. As to how much, there was a pile of money that was paid by Spotify to settle the case for the class action. If I remember correctly, it was $45 million or $47 million. I can't remember. The lawyers took their contingency fees and their legal fees, and that left about $31 million, I think, to be split between all the people that remitted the information to be eligible. How they're going to split that up is contingent upon how many people actually correctly submitted and remitted their information and some other metrics that they have. And I suspect it'll be sometime in the next 6 months, but I'd have to go and reread the settlement agreement. It's been a while since I've read it. Okay, moving on. Someone says, thank you, you're welcome. Can you write a chart of how they cat from the artist through PRO to the platforms back to the artist? So Kadane Green asked, yes. As a matter of fact, if you give me a second, I'm going to drop the link to the PDF I wrote, the Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties, which actually does provide those graphs. I'm going to do that right now. So give me a second. Let's pretend you're listening to Girl from Ipanema as your hold music while I look for this link for you. Here it comes. Okay. All right, I'm copying, I'm pasting, I'm going into my Zoom link. Okay, to all panelists, I just sent you a message. Click here to download the PDF. If you click that, that will download to you the Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties. Nazar Babokar asked me, do you have any idea on a distributor that pays through Western Union because my country does not support PayPal? I do not. That's a real conundrum. It's difficult to remit money around the world. PayPal is the most elegant solution that I'm aware of. Western Union usually isn't feasible, and we've all stopped writing checks. I'm sorry, I don't have a solution to that yet. Let's see. We had a song, so Leslie Stanwyck says, we had a song that another artist covered and recorded and pressed, but never got a license for, and we have never been paid for. Harry Fox did not help us. Is this something you can help with? So in that case, no, that's not what Audium does, but you are the publishing administrator. So by default, the other entity that recorded your song and then manufactured it, if they did it without a license, that's copyright infringement. So my recommendation would be, depending upon who the entity was and how many copies were manufactured, it might be worth your time to have a lawyer write them a letter telling them it's copyright infringement and you'd like to settle it with them and get a payment. Each time there's an infringement, if it's willful, it can be up to $150,000 for each infringement, but you have to go to court. It's a long fight, but those are your rights. The other thing that's really important is this. If you did not register your copyright with the US Copyright Office, go to the Copyright Office and register with them, right? If you did not do that, then you are not eligible for mechanical royalties until the MLC kicks in January of 2021. And you are not eligible to go after statutory damages. So you have to register your copyright with the US Copyright Office to be eligible to recover statutory damages. If you haven't done that, then you can't. But it might be worth having a legal letter sent over going, guys, could you just get a mechanical license and make the payment? Okay, let's see what else is in here. Sorry, can I be a self-published songwriter and have my song distributed on my own label? In that case, how it goes as far as splitting the money. This is from Never Sleep Boy. Yes, if you write your own song, a Black Pen, and then you record it and you distribute it and the money comes back, it's really, I don't want to say it's up to you, but you can split the money however you like if it's just you. Now, if it's you and band members, there's actually a mechanical royalty rate that is set on a download or in physical versus a stream. If it's streaming mechanical royalties, that'll come in completely separate from the money for the recording. So the money for the mechanical will go to you as the self-published songwriter. It should go all to you if you wrote 100% of it. If you only wrote 50%, you should get 50% of it. If it's a download or physical, that money should also come to you separately. For the physical from the record label, if it's the download, then it's passed through by the distributor. That was a mouthful. Don't worry about the downloads, that's going away anyway. So for the streams, it'll be paid to you separately, and the government dictates the rate. If you click on download the PDF that I put into the room, it'll show you how those rates are calculated and how much it is and how much you get paid by a Spotify stream. All right, what else can I got in here? What about Facebook, Instagram, CMS for sound recording? So Almir Ajanovic asks about Facebook, Instagram, and something called CMS for sound recordings. I think what you're asking is, if your music is used for the recording in Facebook, how do you get paid for that? Well, unlike YouTube, Facebook didn't really develop a system. Instead, what they did is they took an approach, at least on this side, and they said, hey, listen, we'll pay you a flat amount of money right now to have 2 years to have this stream or be used on Facebook as many times as we like. Be it 1 billion times or 1 time, you'll still get paid a small piece of money. And the piece of money you'll get paid is predicated on some information we're given by the National Music Publishing Association and the Recording Industry Association of America and funds that we create. The long story short, my 2 cents on these deals is they're pretty sucky. The problem is these are big popular services, and most artists say, well, I really want to have my music there, so I'm willing to do a bad deal and not get a lot of money for it. And until people sort of collectively stop doing that, you're not going to get paid much money from directly from Facebook or Instagram as an example, because you're not negotiating, you're just taking the table scraps that they're feeding you. Okay, so what else? Can we watch the webinar again? Yeah, I'll try to upload it. Let's see. If I do, there's no way to upload it. Okay, sorry. I think that might be about it. I'm sure there's more questions in here I missed. Is publishing admin like Songtrust also collect public performance royalties and will pay to songwriter except the payment paid by PR? Okay, so Mohammed Irfan asks, is the publishing administrator like Songtrust also collecting public performance royalties, and will they pay to the songwriter except the payment paid by the PRL? So the answer is the public performance money paid by ASCAP or BMI gets split in half. Half of it will go directly to the songwriter, and if you're in a deal with a company like Songtrust, the other half will go to Songtrust. Songtrust will take a percentage of it and then remit the rest back to you. Okay? All right. Sorry, I don't mean to mumble at you. So Oscar Amaya says, Jeff, thanks for answering the question, but my real questions and concern is the co-writers are looking for payment from me from the DSP. Is that my pub admin's job? I have a pub admin deal with another company who is responsible to give the mechanical license to the co-writer. So if you have a co-writer on a song, the way it works is Spotify's paying you directly for the percentage you control. Let's say it's 25%, and then they'll pay the other 75% to the other person directly. They're not remitting, although they could, provided they followed a different license. They're not giving the entire amount of money to you for you then to split apart and pay them. The only way that will be happening is if the wrong information is in there. So if the information says that you own 100% of the composition when you don't, and you get all 100% of the money, that's a bad data error, which means you should take your piece and give it over to your co-writer if you want to be nice. But make sure the percentage amount that you put on there is correct, so that's in the databases when the payments come back. And therefore, if you only control 25%, you only get 25%, and the rest of the money will go where it needs to go. Okay, we had a song that another artist covered. Okay, we got that one. All right, another 73 new messages. Oh, dear God. It's hard to keep up with. When you say the song should be registered at an office in the US for mechanicals, what does that mean from Leslie Stanwyck? Good question. So the United States has the US Copyright Office, all right? Type in US Copyright Office, and it'll take you to a website. You should register at that website. That's actually a US governmental organization where you will register with them for a fee. Here's my copyright. It is called such and such. I'm the author, I'm the writer, right? And you're going to register it into the United States Copyright Office where there will be a public record of it. Once you've done that, you're then eligible to sue for statutory damages. but you have to do that. If you don't do that, then legally you can't pursue statutory damages. So there's a fee involved, there's a form you need to fill out. It's just the way the United States set itself up. What else I got in here? How do I pay my collaborator if Audiam pays money to me? That's from Val. Well, if your collaborator, if you mean that you and another person both wrote a song together and you control 50% and they control 50% and you use Audiam, when you come to Audiam, unless the other person granted you the right to represent them, you should only tell us you control 50%. Then we're only going to collect that money for you. The other 50% will stay out there in the world until the other person either gets it themselves or becomes a member of Audiam. If they become a member of Audiam, and they write, hey, I'm Joe Smith, and I control the other 50%. When the money comes in, we split it between you and pay each of you directly to your own accounts. What's the difference between Songtrust and SoundExchange, says Andriy Alkaj. Songtrust works for the composition. It is a publishing administrator. SoundExchange works for the sound recording and collects money for the digital transmission and the public performance of sound recordings. Two completely separate things. There's no connection between them. Oh, what time is it? Oh God, it's 5:15. So you guys have been listening to me ramble for like 2 hours and 15 minutes. Would a service like MasterWriter SoundGuard be enough to copyright your music? I'm afraid I don't know what MasterWriter SoundGuard is, but no, unless they go to the US Copyright Office and register your copyright with that organization, and you have to pay a fee to do that. All right, I think, oh, and there's another 8 new messages. Michelle Dumond, I had a publishing admin deal with TuneCore for 4 releases. I pulled them down from all platforms. I want to re-release them under a new name. Can I get new digital identifiers? Should I? Will TuneCore have any say over the tracks if they've been pulled in their original release form? So I'm a little confused because you're saying you had a publishing administration deal with TuneCore, but you're talking about sound recordings. 2 separate things. If TuneCore continues to control your rights for administration for this, it doesn't matter if you pull the recordings down or not, but now you're talking about retitling them, giving them different names. So if you're doing a deal with a publishing administrator over here, and you're going to take the recordings down, the recordings of your songs down, and then redistribute them under new names, remember, the administrator doesn't know those new names. So they're going to be looking for money for the old names, and if the same recordings with new names now begin to stream, they're not going to be able to connect the recording to the composition because they have different names, which means you won't be getting this money. As far as should you get new identifiers, those are called ISRCs for the recordings. You're supposed to continue to use the old ones, but you're retitling your songs, your recordings, so we're almost done. So it gets a little wonky. I wouldn't do the retitling. I would keep them under their original name if they're the same recordings, because all you're going to do is create data messes, which can stop the flow of money over here. But that's my recommendation on that. Let's see. So someone asks, is it technically breaking the law if the Whom Place down the street is playing my music on Spotify, not premium? It's not breaking the law. The Whom Place down the street, though, even if it's playing it on Spotify, needs a public performance license. Even if they're paying a subscription fee to Spotify, that was litigated some time ago. So it's not against the law, provided they have a public performance license, in which case they're paying ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR, and then those entities are supposed to be paying you for the play that's happening in the Whom Place down the street. I could use some coolness right about now. I could use some social interaction right about now. Okay. Let's see. All right, I'm going to stop there. What's 5 and 6? Let's see. Who is responsible for mechanical rights licensing? For example, if I have other writers and I have X amount of streams, how and who pays the writers? So I'm talking about digital service providers. Each one of you is responsible for your own ownership percentage. So if 5 people wrote a song, each one, let's make it 4. Each one controls 25%. Ringo, Paul, George, and John. Each one of you would be responsible for collecting your own money. You're all your own publishing administrators. If you became a member of Audiam to do this, and it was just Ringo that did it, we'd only collect Ringo's 25%. If Ringo and John did, we'd collect 25% for John, 25% for Ringo. Paul and George would be on their own, and so forth. So each one of you is responsible for the administration of your own copyrights, unless you became a member of an organization like Audiam, who would then work for you just for the reproduction right, Or if you did a deal with a publishing administrator, then that administrator would represent you only for your percentage, at least in the digital streaming world. Is the publishing administrator the same as a distributor? No, a distributor sends out sound recordings to put onto the shelves of stores, and a publishing administrator licenses and collects money for the lyric and melody. Two separate things, two different things. The distributor puts the music out there. When the music is downloaded or streamed, it creates money here and money here. Two distinct and separate income streams. One here, one here. Distributor deals with this, publishing administration deals with that. Two segregated separate things in the streaming world. Okay. Sorry, man. Uwe Uleman, what does number 6 say? Digital transmission. My apologies. So I think I'm going to stop there because I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, 49 new messages. I'm like addicted to answering questions. Hey, Jeff, when the DSPs do not, when the DSPs do not pay the co-writers, how do they get paid? Oh, I already did that one. Okay. So on that note, if I can figure out how to stop the recording, I'm going to stop. You know, I'm cooped up in my New York apartment for Lord knows how long. And if you guys enjoy this, I'll do one every week or try to. I mean, why not? By the way, I thought you'd get a kick out of this. Ready? Yeah. So my daughter, Kara, God bless her, her whiteboard and all these wonderful books for allowing me to prop it up. We're actually in my bedroom at the moment. So thank you very much. I will see, I did ask Zoom to record this. I will do my best now to upload it to my YouTube channel. My Twitter feed is TuneCore Jeff. I put a lot of information up there. I'll probably be changing my Twitter handle shortly. And make sure you get the definitive guide to Spotify royalties. I'm sure you have more questions. Email support@audium.com in order to have me try to answer more questions, or tweet, don't do that, or tweet me your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. Sometimes I do little video vignettes. In regards to Audium, anyone can go to audium.com. You can sign up. We do the YouTube service right out of the box. You can apply to become a member for our mechanical royalty licensing and collection service. We have to check up to make sure that you're not someone pretending to be someone else. There's a lot of fraud that happens. We check your compositions, make sure you're actually doing your own administration. If you're a publishing administrator from another part of the world, we can do it for you as well. And then we'll get that going. Again, thank you very much. Be safe. Sorry about the crazy times, and thanks for watching.